Morning. It is always so good to see your faces and to be here today. I just want to tell you something that's been going on in our family. If you got here early and I didn't come over to talk to you, it's not because I don't like you. It's because a couple days ago, my daughter got a fever. And before you panic and run, she tested negative for COVID. But just to be safe, I didn't want to even give you whatever she has because it definitely makes life more complicated. So if you don't see me afterwards, send me a message or give me a phone call. Would love to talk to you. But that's why you won't see a whole lot of me today after the service. It is incredible to be together and to be able to study this thing called King Jesus. And over the last few weeks, we've been studying through this, and I just kind of want to recap, because when we get into a series, sometimes we're like, okay, what were we talking about last week? And even I am like, wait, what were we talking about last week? So here we go. King Jesus, we've talked about the idea that Jesus is king and that he has all authority. But we know that as Americans, we are sort of conditioned to resent and question authority. We know that we tend to not like authority, and so it makes us feel a little strange even towards Jesus when we talk about him as king. Now, so our world has then kind of reacted against this and said, well, Jesus is your friend, he's your buddy, which is true, but Jesus is still our king. And so how do we respond to him? Well, we know Jesus is a king unlike any other. He doesn't come to rule with an iron fist. Instead, he comes with love and compassion and grace and forgiveness. We know he's bringing a kingdom unlike any other. It's, again, a kingdom of love where the poor are lifted up, where those who mourn will be comforted, where basically everything is turned on its end and nobody is without in his kingdom. It's a fantastic kingdom. Now, how do we respond? How do we obey King Jesus? Well, we start by obeying him in love. From a place of love and not fear, we obey King Jesus. And then last week, we talked about how we are to defeat temptation with him by our side. He is the conqueror, and there is no way that you and I on our own can combat all of the temptation, all of the sin that is put in front of us. And so we do it with King Jesus. And today I want to talk about how we can live lives that are authentic to him. One of the things that we have known just over the last, 15 or 20 years is that the word authenticity seems to be a buzzword. It seems like wherever you go, you hear people say, well, we need to be authentic, or this is authentic. And everybody wants everything to be authentic. Ladies want a real, authentic man, right? And we want our friends to be real with us. We want them to be authentic with us. We want an authentic worship environment, whatever that means. And we want authentic Mexican food. I don't know why that's always, with authentic, but it always says right there on the label, authentic, right on the jar of salsa that we have. So we want things that are authentic, but why is it that we crave that so much? And I think it's because we see so many things that are not authentic. We see so many things that are fake. I want to give you a couple of fun examples today. There's a young man, he's about 18 or 19, that went to a zoo in Cairo, Egypt, just east of Cairo. And he was excited about the zoo. He was excited to go to the zebra exhibit. And then when he got to the zebra exhibit, he saw this instead, which if you focus there on the supposed zebra, you'll see something a little bit different. There's some smudge marks around the face of the zebra. And on closer examination, this isn't a zebra. It's a donkey that has painted stripes on it in order to look like a zebra. You can see just how impressed he is with the specimen of this zebra. And it's easy to tell that it's not authentic. And it's not the only example. It doesn't take long to see just so many things in our world that are not authentic. If you have ever owned a Jeep or know a Jeep Wrangler owner, you know that they pride themselves on the fact that these vehicles can go off-road. They can go anywhere, right? They can get muddy, they can get dirty. And if your Jeep Wrangler looks like this, kind of pristine and polished, then other Jeep Wrangler owners are going to give you a hard time because you're not using it to its full potential. And so they'll make fun of you for not having dirt on it. And so Jeep, for those people who live in the city, Jeep did you a favor. You can now buy cans of mud mask for your Jeep. On the side of the can here, it says 100% all natural dirt. And you purchase this, probably for a great markup, and you can apply it to your vehicle in order to look like that you've been on some sort of adventure. In fact, the side of the can also says, adventure in a can. No adventure exists in a can. But so many things in our world look fake. They look inauthentic. And so when we see that, it's no wonder that we want authenticity. We want to be authentic in an inauthentic world. Well, our world says us we need to be authentic in everything we do. Well, how do we do that? How do we do that? So let me ask this question. Are you authentic? Are you authentic? Think about how you are in your workplace. Are you authentic there? Think about the scenarios, who you interact with. Are you authentic when you are with your friends? Are you authentic when you're with your family? Are you authentic when you come to church? Or are certain words left out? Are you authentic on your ride to church? Normally people are authentic on their ride to church, but then maybe when they get inside church, they're a little less authentic than they were on the ride up. So are you authentic in all of these places? And how do we become authentic? Well, our world tells us that the way to be authentic is to stay true to yourself. To be true to yourself is the way to stay authentic. And so if we want to be authentic, we have to figure out who we are and then stay that way, I guess. And what I want to say is that it doesn't work. And I'm going to prove that it doesn't work in just a second. And so imagine with me this scenario. You go to the grocery store and it's on a Friday. Now let's imagine for a second, if you're an extrovert, put on your imagination caps and pretend that you are an introvert. And most often, you just sort of want to be alone, and that's how you recharge. So you're an introvert, and you've had a long and tough week. Now, you had to pick up a few groceries before you can sort of crawl in bed with a good book, and here you are at the grocery store, and what do you see? You see one of your friends. Now, how are you going to be authentic in this moment? If authenticity means to be true to yourself, to be true to your personality and your emotions, then what would you do? You would just ride your cart by that person and just blow by and keep on going. But if authenticity is different, if authenticity is to be true to your beliefs, let's say one of your beliefs is that friends should be friendly. Seems like a good belief. And so if you're authentic to your beliefs and true to your beliefs, then you would go up and you would say hi. If you're trying to become a better person, then you might have an ideal that I should be more friendly in my life, and so you might go up and say hi because of that. And if you begin to wrestle all of these things out, should you be authentic to your personality, which is an introvert? Should you be authentic to your emotions, which want you just to go home and go to bed and get some rest? Should you be authentic to your beliefs? Or should you be authentic to your ideals? And so in just one quick story, it becomes very confusing how we should be. Can we see that? See how being true to ourselves doesn't always lead to the most authentic, example of who we are? And that's just if we're consistent. And we know that sometimes one week we'll think one thing, and the next week we'll think another thing. Then how in the world, once we throw that in the mix, are we going to stay authentic? So I would say this is if you're trying to be authentic to yourself, you will never be authentic. If you're trying to be authentic to yourself and all of the pieces and all of the moods and all of the changes that we undergo, then you're never going to be authentic. And so how do we do that? In Matthew chapter 6, verse 24, I think Jesus gets at the heart of this. In this passage, Jesus has been doing the Sermon on the Mount. He's been talking to people about having the right motivation for the good things that they do. And so he says, it's great that you do good things, but what are your motives? And so he's talking about things like, when you pray, don't do it to be seen by others. And when you fast, don't do it to be seen by others. See, it's okay to do, the right thing, but we also want to do it with the right motive. Jesus is talking about being authentic or just putting on false pretenses. And he gets to this verse in verse 24, and he says, no one can serve two masters. Either you will hate the one and love the other, or you will be devoted to one and despise the other. You cannot serve both God and money. Now, I'm sure you've read this verse before, and sometimes we just kind of blow through this quickly. But if you really look at it, what he's saying is very plain. It's very simple. But if you try to serve two masters, you're going to have hate. You're going to have hate towards one of them. If you try to love one, you're going to not be able to love the other. You're going to have hate, or you're going to despise the other one. And I don't know that we have really believed this. I think if we think about our actions, sometimes we believe that I can love two masters. But he's saying, no, this is impossible. You cannot serve both God, and in this example, he's using money. I had a friend of mine who has gone to church all his life, and we were talking about one of the sermons that was given. I didn't preach this sermon, and he was like, I don't think we should talk about giving. Yeah, giving to God is okay, but I'd much rather give to the things that I want. And when those words came out, I was like, do you hear yourself right now? Do you hear what you sound like? But he didn't. He didn't because he was serving money. He was serving money. Money was his master. And the Bible, is very clear that money makes a very poor master. And what Jesus is saying here is God cannot be your master while money is your master, because you will end up hating God and loving money, or vice versa. You cannot serve both masters. So for him, he didn't see it. He didn't understand that, his love for money prevented him from donating and supporting the mission of God. And so he missed it because money was his master. Now, there are a lot of other things that can make really poor masters. And I think this principle ties over not just to money, but to a lot of other things that we have. And so if you fill in the blank almost with anything, you'll realize that you cannot serve both God and whatever it is. So I want to talk about one today that also just sort of pervades everything that we do, is approval. God and approval cannot be your master. Both of those things cannot serve as your master. And I think this is one that in particular is very hard for many, many people. Because we want others to like us. How many of you want someone else to like you? There's a good couple hands there. Some people are like, no, I don't care if anyone likes me. But several of us want someone to like us, and a lot of us want everyone to like us. And, even when I moved here, I moved from one town to another, and if you've ever done that, sort of your whole world is turned upside down. And in the first year that I was here, I realized I really want everyone to like me. But it's not always possible. And if approval is your master, you will soon discover that it will shatter you, and it will not be possible to serve God and approval. Many of you know Taylor Swift. She is, super talented, super famous, has done basically everything she can do in her industry, and yet she struggles with approval. She struggles with approval being her master. She went through a period of her life where she was receiving a lot of criticism for things she was doing, and this is what she writes about that experience. When people decided that I was wicked and evil and conniving and not a good person, that was the one I couldn't really bounce back from, because my whole life was centered around it. We're people who get into this line of work because we wanted people to like us, because we like the sound of people clapping, because it made us forget how much we feel like we're not good enough. I mean, this is Taylor Swift. She has all of the approval. I mean, she has millions of people who love her and love her voice and love what she does. But it's still not enough. She still feels inauthentic. She still feels like she's not real, like she's playing some other person's life. And despite the fact that everyone thinks she's great, she feels like she's not good enough. Because approval is a very hard master. Serving two masters makes you inauthentic. Serving two masters means that you've got to lie to one. And I would say that even the good things in life make very poor masters. Let me give you this example. God and family cannot be your master. Back in 2011, 2012, I wrote a real short book for families to learn how to pass down faith to their kids. And it helped a lot of people, but there was a few families that had kind of an unintended side effect. And they began to come to me and say, Joel, I am going to have to stop serving in this ministry because I really want to protect my family time. Sometimes life circumstances come up, and that's fine. And then it was, well, Joel, I'm going to have to stop doing this. I'm not going to go to life group anymore because I'm really trying to protect my family time. And then it was, Joel, we're not going to do Bible class anymore because we're really trying to protect my family time. And little by little, family became the master of their life, the filter for which they made all of the decisions. And so God was not sitting on the throne. God was not the master, but family became the master, and everything sort of became twisted in their life. And so family can make a very poor master as well. I'm going to say this one. May get in trouble for this one, but, I'm not doing the approval thing anymore, so I'm allowed to do that, right? God and social justice cannot be your master. God and social justice cannot be your master. When God is king, when Jesus is king, everything finds its place the way it should. And so should we be about social justice? Yes. Are there people being oppressed? Yes. Is there racism in our world that is alive and well today? Yes. Should we be fighting against that? Yes, absolutely. But if social justice becomes our master, what we begin to discover is there is a hate and anger that builds up in our heart. And it doesn't belong on the throne. God does. Jesus does. King Jesus does. And so when Jesus is living on the face of the earth, what does he do? He takes care of the widows. He takes care of the orphans. He takes care of those who are oppressed. He comes to the side of those who are hurting constantly. He is filled with so much compassion. And I've read through them many times, and there's not an ounce of callousness in the heart of Jesus. And yet, there are moments when Jesus says, I can't heal anymore. I can't spend time with the poor anymore because I need to go preach and share the message of God. Do we see that? Our world today would have a field day with him saying, what do you mean you can't help me anymore because you're going to go preach a sermon, right? Nobody cares about sermons anymore. Because God is king. His message is king. And yes, social justice has its place. Yes, we need to be fighting alongside Jesus. But King Jesus needs to stay on the throne no matter what. If you support a good cause with anger in your heart, God is not your master. And so if you find anger in your heart, we need to crown Jesus as king so that love can enter back into your heart. If Jesus is king, what we find is that he will build love in your heart, and he will build his kingdom with your hands. It always ends up better this way. If Jesus is king, then the attitude starts first. Because we're serving him, we're serving the king, we're following his words, we're following his instructions. And so love is built in our heart. And when love is built in our heart and we are acting out of love, then great things happen and we will always get his kingdom. But if someone else is on the king and we dethrone Jesus, we get a world that we didn't really want in the first place. So this is what I would say, is that authentic people have one audience and one master. Authentic people have one audience and one master. The way we are authentic isn't to be true to ourselves. It doesn't work that way. We change from moment to moment. We are divided into 6 different categories on any given minute. But Jesus is king. Jesus is one. He is of one mind, one heart, and he is unchanging. So if he is king, if he is our audience, and he is our one master, what happens is we actually discover who we are. Because he's the one who made us. He's the one that created us. He is the one that formed us. He is the one that helped raise us and gave us our families and our parents. And he put us all together, and he is continuing to raise us into the people that he wants us to be. Authentic people live for God and serve Jesus because he is our master. How do we do this? If you're sitting here this morning thinking, I'm not authentic in this way and in that way or in that environment or at home, what do you do? I think the first thing is you have to know what your other masters are. And so I would say this is, find a time today. You can stay here and write it down while you're sitting here, or find some time today to write down the name of the false masters that live in your life. Sit down and write down the other kings that are vying for control of the throne. Because this is huge for your life with God. The other thing that I would say is this, is pray that your kingdom come, your will be done in my life as it is in heaven. We need to pray that God's kingdom comes, not just in the world, not just around us, but in our life, in our heart, as it is in heaven. See, a lot of times when we see, God's kingdom isn't coming in the world, and we're very upset with other people, we're very upset with government officials or with church leaders or whoever it is we're upset with, it has to come in our heart first. So pray each day that your kingdom come, your will be done in my life as it is in heaven. I want to share a story that I found about a young man who is a violin player. In his book, What God Thinks When We Fall, Stephen C. Roy tells a story about a young violinist. This man was living in London, and although he was a superb musician, he was afraid of playing for large audiences. His critics began to give him a hard time and say, you really need to do this, you really need to step up, you really need to overcome your fears. And so finally, he agreed to play and to perform at the largest concert hall in London. The young violinist came onto the stage and sat alone on a stool. He put his violin under his chin and played for an hour and a half. No music in front of him, no orchestra behind him, no breaks, just an hour and a half of absolutely beautiful violin music. After 10 minutes or so, many critics put down their pads and listened. Like the rest, after the performance, the crowd rose to its feet and began applauding wildly, and they wouldn't stop. But the young violinist didn't acknowledge the applause. He just peered out into the audience as if he were looking for something or someone. Finally, he found what he was looking for. Relief came over his face, and he began to acknowledge the crowd and their applause. The young violinist was backstage when some of the critics came back to ask a question. They said, "You were wonderful, but we have this one question. Why did it take so long for you to acknowledge the applause of the audience?" The young man took a deep breath and answered, "I was really afraid of playing, yet this was something I knew I needed to do. Tonight, just before I came on stage, I received a message that my master teacher was going to be in the audience. And so when I arrived on stage, I tried to look for him, but I couldn't find him. I looked while I was playing, but I couldn't find him. And so when I finished, I looked more intently into the crowd. I just had to know what he thought of my playing. That was all that mattered. Finally, I found him in the balcony, He was standing and applauding with a big smile on his face. After seeing him, I was finally able to relax. I said to myself, if the master is pleased with what I have done, then everything else is okay. And this is what needs to be on our hearts. If the master is pleased by what you are doing, how you are living, how you are serving, how you are praying, how you are fasting, how you are studying, then everything else is okay. And here is the thing that is important. Our master knows we're imperfect. Our master knows that we will never be perfect. And yet when we do the best we can, what does he do? He stands up, smiles broadly, and has his applause for us. See, we are not called to live for our true self. We are called to live for our true King. And then everything else will fall into place. If this morning you've been playing for the wrong master, if you've been living for the wrong master, if you've been living for money or approval or for something else that has competed for the throne, and I ask that you pull down those monuments. You pull down those false gods and those false kings and false masters and crown Jesus as King while we sing to the one and only God that is worthy, Jesus, the Lamb of God.